Lights, camera, action. Okay, Bob Berney. What a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is wonderful. So I want to just get up to date because we haven't seen each other in a while. What's going on since, I guess, was it June or July? When did you leave from Amazon?
In June.
Yeah.
And, well, first of all, I've been taking it easy after after a lot of stuff. But I went to some of the European film festivals like Deauville, Locarno, that I've never been to, because they're off the kind of main buying circuit. So I've been cruising around watching movies, but taking it easy and a little bit out of the pressure for a few weeks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's been great.
Nice. And your term there was a 4-year period, right?
Yeah, I was there
from start to finish.
Yeah, I was there 4 years. I moved from New York to LA to start to work with Amazon, and we had it was a really cool and interesting run with a lot of, Manchester by the Sea and The Big Sick, and last year Cold War, some great, really exciting movies.
Yeah, I'm interested in. I didn't get a chance. I want to see Cold War, but the director did that film, the black and white movie before that. I can't remember the name of it, and it was shot 4:3. I think Cold War was as well. Am I right?
As well, yeah. No, it's always like you come up with the challenges. So it's the square frame. It's black and white. It's foreign language, and yet Cold War. Not only for me, but I think a lot of people, when they saw that movie, that was like, this is why I first got interested in cinema. It's that kind of movie, that good, and the fact that Pavel got nominated for Best Director for this black and white Polish film was amazing.
And
amazing.
I think was it true? I think he was nominated for the film before that too.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, and he won Best Foreign Film.
Yeah. So
So
amazing.
very lucky in the sort of distribution career to meet these amazing artists.
It's wonderful. I have a weird connection to, not directly to the director, but to his sort of organization, because I was a regular going to the Kameramage Film Festival in Poland, and he was connected to the film school in Łódź.
Absolutely.
So he draws from this incredible pedigree of great cinematographer, technicians, and incredible people that were part of his world. Yeah,
absolutely, and a teacher and a mentor.
Yeah,
too.
exactly right.
Yeah, which is so good to sort of give back like that. He's very apparently amazing in his he does classes, and he's very tough, and you learn a lot.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I want to tally way back, because we've known each other for a number of years, but I don't really have much about in my memory of ever having a discussion with you about. I guess you grew up in Oklahoma. Is that correct?
I grew up in Oklahoma City and went to school though down in Austin at University of Texas in Austin, where so I had a football issue, but it worked out.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Right. But and when I went to the film school there, I think a mutual friend of ours, Mike Simpson, was there as well.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And I still get, Austin with South by and everything. I go back a lot, because of that and because of a lot of people in the film business there that are in Austin. So
there's a foundation, right there, because there were, I think, Richard, right? And, and all these other Robert Rodriguez. Yeah.
So it's still a great place to go visit.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about. I mean, I want to know a little bit more about your early life and Oklahoma and all of that before you end up at UT, which is a launching point. Then we can go into that, but I want to hear more about that and your family and all of that.
Well, Oklahoma had, my remembrance sometimes of those days is through movies and through theaters. So, I think, because I loved the films, but I liked the physical buildings and
the environment of a cinema.
Right. And we actually had in Oklahoma City a Cinerama theater, which there weren't that many of them. It was called the Cooper. And so I saw 2001 Space Odyssey, Kubrick's film, in Cinerama, and I remember in Oklahoma City before the show, a trap door opened in the stage, and slowly kind of a creaky machine comes up with the flag, and you had to say the Pledge of Allegiance before the movie. And so you say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the flag kind of goes down, and then Kubrick starts.
Oh my God.
So it was great.
That's wild.
It was really good. And these theaters were, it was like a Broadway road show. You know, there was no popcorn. There was no, you had an intermission, which you could come out, and for some reason they served like a weird orange drink, you know, like that. There was no Coke, or it was very.
There was no concession.
No concession.
Not a normal
You
concession.
could have a little bit during the intermission. But I'll never forget the intermission in 2001 when Hal sees them talking in the capsule, and then it cuts. I mean, it's a brilliant intermission.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, I remember that Oklahoma City from, you know, in a way through movies and theaters.
But what about like your mom and dad and all of that? What was that connection to cinema through your mother and father?
You know, my father was in the oil business. It's not unusual he was like natural gas. He was an executive, and my mother was really the one who went to the movies all the time, and her favorite director was Hitchcock. So I sort of learned, you know, about him through her until Psycho. And after Psycho, not only wouldn't she never take a shower again, but she wouldn't go any more Hitchcock movies after that. It just freaked her out.
Wow.
Later, she got it, but there was many years where she couldn't.
Yeah, it closed the door for a bit. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
And so you had a sort of the starting of a love of cinema growing up in Oklahoma, and then you go from being growing up in Oklahoma to moving to Austin, and you're in college and you're studying film out of the gate. Is that did you go? So you went right into it, and you studied. It wasn't just a film history study. You were studying production.
That was
you were
production, history,
filmmaking. And both of them.
Both,
Okay.
and also I was working at a local movie theater, of course, the projectionist. So I was threading up 35 millimeter films and showing.
That to me is absolutely fantastic because the idea that I can't believe that my phone just went off. I don't know how that happened, but we're going to solve that problem immediately. So in any case, I worked as a carbon arc projectionist for the Film Society when I was in college. 20-minute reels, switching arcs, metal ICC cases, metal reels, doing changeovers, prepping prints to go up, showing as many. And when I finally worked as a projectionist in Cambridge, I used to work at the Summerville Theater in Davis Square, 4 films a night. Yeah. So it was crazy. So you used to do that.
I did, although I have to say I didn't do the carbon arcs. But and when I was doing it, we had the platter system, right? So it wasn't reel to reel. So if you loaded up a 35 millimeter film,
so you didn't have to do changeovers,
but you did have to get it right, because once you put these reels together on a platter, if one of them was wrong or backwards, you're dead. And that happened a few times. Not
where you had out of sequence.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for a changeover projectionist who pulls the wrong reel.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. The moments of sweating in the booth. Oh my God.
So I was doing that at the same time. So I was kind of looking at, the theater business as well as the production side in school. So, but it was all intertwined. And I showed a lot of films at the university and went to films, and so it was all part of it. My cousin lived in Austin, who was a writer. He's done a lot of stuff, but he's also a poet. And he started a poetry magazine called Lucille, and his writing partner and publisher was Gunnar Hansen. So they were in a cafe, and this guy walked in and said, "Hey," to Gunnar, who's a big guy, "Hey, how would you like to be in my movie?" And it was Toby Hooper. So Gunnar became Leatherface.
Oh my God! And Chainsaw.
Chainsaw.
Of course, which is shot in Texas, of course, Toby.
And he was friends, my cousin, he was this mild-mannered poet that became Leatherface.
Oh, my God.
So anyway.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I remember showing Chainsaw when I used to work in the theaters. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Over and over again. Yeah. So okay, so now you're in Austin. You're studying film and film history, but you're also going to be like making a shorts and producing stuff, shooting on film. Some of that you were doing both, or you were leaning more towards the. You were doing a full film school.
I was doing
study.
both, yeah. And of course I think the working in the theater, diverted me a bit, and so as I got to when I graduated, I ended up working for the theater I was working for was owned by AMC Theater, and they were a very small chain at the time, and they had a theater in Houston called the Greenway that they said, well, look, this thing's a loser, but maybe you want to go there and show some, indie films or foreign films.
So they helped you curate and they enabled you to curate and program.
Yeah, I mean, I think they thought of it more like, this theater they had is in a basement of a parking lot and no one can find it. So if you could get anybody to go there, try it. And so I did that for a while, and then through these connections, found a partner to go in business with for a theater in Dallas. We wanted to find a location to do it ourselves. And there was a small theater in the middle of a suburb in Dallas called Farmers Branch. I mean, it was not, for indie and foreign films, this was not the greatest location, but we started. It was a former, like, Jerry Lewis theater. It was a small theater. So one of the first films that I played there.
Stop for a second. Jerry Lewis Theater, as in?
Yeah.
The man himself?
The man himself owned theaters.
I say, okay, keep going. I want to go into that, but keep going.
Yeah. And so one of the first films we played up there in this far suburb was Jean-Luc Godard's Every Man for Himself. And the entire audience came out of the theater and they go, is this a movie theater? And I was like, yes, it is. You're in it. And they go, but that's not a movie you're showing. We demand our money back. Because you're saying this is a movie theater, but this thing in there is not a movie. So I had to give everybody their money back. I wrote Godard because I figured he'd love that, but I never heard from him.
Never heard back.
Never heard back.
Oh my.
So it was a rough start. But then, not that long after that, there was an Australian film called My Brilliant Career.
Gillian Armstrong.
Yeah.
I mean, just, I remember showing it, but I bet it was something a film that I loved. And there were many other directors, of course, out of Australia, like, Bruce Beresford and a whole team of people that were very coming up at that time, right?
So we booked that in. And again, this is the same theater that everybody demanded their money back. And it played months. Like, it was unheard of that a film like this in Dallas would play at all, and it played months, and so everybody started coming out to this middle of nowhere theater.
And the theater name again? Sorry.
The theater was called the Showcase in Farmers Branch.
Okay, so it had a brand name of Showcase, which of course is connected to a brand name of a larger entity, but not because it was a Jerry Lewis theater.
Yeah, it's just
it wasn't connected because National Amusements was Showcase too. How interesting!
It was just weird. So then later, we did find a location that was great in Dallas called the Inwood Theater. And that was an old, from one of the big circuits, beautiful art, modern, built in the probably late 40s. But it had been damaged by a fire, and it was essentially out of business. It was a former, we had these theaters called dollar houses, like a discount sub-run. But the bones of this thing were beautiful, and it was owned by, at the time, by this guy named Leroy Mitchell, who is the chairman emeritus of Cinemark. And he leased us this theater, which was amazing. And we restored it and started playing these. And it was a great location. And it's still there today. Mark Cuban ended up buying it. Landmark bought it and operated it.
The Inwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's still there today, but it's now owned by, it's still Landmark. It's owned by Charles Cohen now.
Right. But but the theater remains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Inwood sort of followed you in a sense as almost as like a little mini brand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when I remember meeting you The first time, I think it was in Culver City in L.A., you had an identity for a company called Inwood Films. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. And it's not, although I love the neighborhood here in New York, Inwood, but it was for the Inwood Theater. And
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
It's always been sort of a brand. We've had different companies and just sort of, it's always my connection because the Inwood was this beautiful theater. But the main thing about it, it was a community. And we was the first theater to have a bar and restaurant, even before the Angelica here.
And before other theaters decided that it was cool to do that, right?
Or legal.
Or legal. Oh, okay.
Or legal. Because
okay.
you couldn't have liquor licenses, and you still can't. Like even in Manhattan.
What about Alamo?
They've figured out how to do it, and it's sort of the laws have changed over the years because they're restaurants. They figured out a way. They're still
iPick, same thing, right?
iPick. Yeah.
Right. That's right. They have the bar restaurant.
Yeah. But mine was different. And at the time, the bar was in the lobby, and it made it look like it was always there. You didn't go into the theater, so it was separate. And it became a place where, kind of like the Angelica, where afterwards everybody would come out and talk about the movies. So it was a real community thing. And we had, great bartenders and music and events. And we started hosting film festivals there. A film festival called the USA Film Festival. And so I rented the theater to them. So then they started bringing in directors and having shows. And, so I started meeting a lot of people from that. Like we had, at one point, John Cassavetes came in and, he was on stage doing a Q&A, and unfortunately, there was about 30 people, but it was amazing to have these people there.
Right, you were able to host the artists in front of an audience, which probably was not happening in other places, right?
No, it was
probably not anywhere.
It was really great, and we
now. What are the years now? Give me. Let's
this
talk.
is like early '80s to mid '80s, and we had not only like famous directors like Cassavetes, but we also did like midnight show, like great. Sort of exploitation directors. We had Roger Corman come in.
Wow.
And when I talked about the platter system, I was showing this midnight show called Hundra, Killer of Men, and the producer and this actress, I guess they had an affair, but they were having a fight. They were not getting along, and one of the reels was upside down and backwards in the middle of this full house screaming midnight show. And I just said, there's nothing I can do. Let's let it go on. And she got up on stage and goes, don't worry. It was my boyfriend, the producer, that did this on purpose. And then he was banging on the projection door trying to kill us. So this fights broke out, and we just kind of let it run. So it was always interesting.
Oh, my God.
Always fun.
Oh, my God.
We did a film festival with on those type of films with the film critic in Dallas was a guy named John Bloom, who had an alter ego called Joe Bob Briggs, who would review drive-in movies. So we did a lot of work with him, and he still does it today at the Alamo.
But there was a show called Drive-In Theater.
With Joe,
right?
Yeah, it was on Turner. Yeah.
Yeah, because I used to watch that show. That's the guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
He's a serious film critic at the time and a author of some great both fiction and nonfiction books.
He was a bit of a cowboy host, actually, and he would come on and introduce the film before it came on. I used to watch him,
He still does it today at the Alamo.
Oh, he does?
Theaters. He tours the country and does a lot with that, and he's fantastic.
Wow.
Anyway.
It's funny we're talking about that era. I'm not trying to draw back into my life working in the theater, but it was my first job out of college in 1984, and I worked at the Somerville Theater, and I worked for a manager back then called Garen Daly, who came out of the Orson Welles in off Harvard Square, and Garen was my boss, and he was at that time also sort of a renegade in the local community because the Somerville Theater was an old vaudeville theater, and it was a balcony and lower level theater, the huge screen. It had a projection booth with a ladder that you had to go up into through a door. And I remember that they hosted fairly regular live music shows. Yeah. They had Taj Mahal. They had Donovan. They had Michael Doucette. They had the Neville brothers. It was wild. And then they used to do also some of this calendar programming where they would have like a midnight run,
Right.
and people would show up in their sleeping bags, and they would stay overnight for a horror fest.
Absolutely. I
It
think,
was total craziness. I don't know if he was copying you or whatever. He probably heard about you, but it was just brilliant.
I
Yeah.
think a
What
lot.
an era.
Yeah, I think a lot of the independent theater operators at the time would communicate. They didn't have a formal association like now. It's more formal with art house conversion, and
Yeah.
so. But it was informal then, and I think independents were classically like you didn't want to join. You're sort of like really independent, but you would meet, and I would meet a lot of them at the Telluride Film Festival every year, because a lot of those theater owners would go to Telluride to discover what films were coming out or maybe being acquired. So it was a great place to meet, and we in the early days, a lot of the or people from Boston or San Francisco would meet at Telluride and talk about the movies. But I think it has come full circle, because I think at the Inwood, the film festivals, the live appearances, Q&As, that's really what's making the movies work now. If you look at in Los Angeles, New York, the directors and actors doing Q&As, you have to eventize a theatrical film to get people to go.
The Metrograph.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of
And
come
IFC
back.
Cinema. Yeah.
IFC, which, I was in the early days when I worked at IFC, was also part of working with John Searing on designing that theater.
And then if I'm not correct, John Banco's still there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because John was out of distribution.
Yeah.
What, am I right?
He was Cowboy.
Cowboy booking.
Cowboy
right?
it was him and Noah Cowan,
Noah
who
Cowan, who
later
ultimately
ran
went to Toronto.
the Toronto Film Festival. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all
it's a family.
yeah, it's
It's a family. And so to jump around a little bit further forward, you emerge in advance of IFC and this is sort of starting with, let's say, like with Film Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I know of Film Dallas. I'm pretty good friends with John Ives and some of the people. I mean, I don't know if John was John involved. I don't even. He was involved. Okay, so John's a good friend,
Yeah.
but I don't know much about the life of Film Dallas and the story of Film Dallas, which was. Am I right in saying that was one of your early gigs?
Yeah. Well,
when you left exhibition.
Well, it was part of that, and that when we were doing, when I was saying earlier that we were renting the theater to the film festival at the Inwood, to the USA Film Festival, and the head of the film festival was a guy named Sam Grogg, and so all these artists and directors are coming into Dallas, and the film festival's at the theater, and everybody starts to go, this could be a business, and so Sam. All the bankers there funded Sam. They go, well, you're here in Dallas. You're a Hollywood guy. You must know how to make movies. So Sam started Film Dallas, and one of the first
As a financier.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was the creative. He was the he picked the movies, and one of the couple first projects they did were Kiss of the Spider Woman and Trip to Bountiful. And,
Oh my God!
And both of them won Academy Awards like the first year.
Wow, that's right. I remember
so-
them.
or second year.
I didn't realize that's how they you
Started.
don't know the backstory. Yeah.
Yeah. So then it got bigger, and I ended up going to work for Sam in Film Dallas to start distribution. So I went from exhibition to distribution. And at the time, New World, which was now Bob Ramey, if you remember Bob, was looking to raise money, came to Dallas, and ended up, instead of raising money, he ended up buying Film Dallas. So we all moved to Los Angeles, and as soon as we got out there, New World goes, no, we're not going to be in the film business anymore. And so we were just stranded. And it was all over. I mean,
Now, New World. I'm going to go back to Dallas in a moment before we go way forward. But New World was UK.
No,
The
no,
U.S.
No, it was Roger Corman.
It was Corman's company.
Yeah.
Okay, so that
He had
was
left.
Corman. He had left.
He had
That's what I'm
left.
thinking because I knew the Corman company
Yeah.
and all of the films that they made and what he had
Yeah.
created, but that was Corman's company.
Yeah,
That
and-
you were part of.
Yeah, and it was after he'd left and Raimi was running it. But then they decided to go into television only and get out of the movie business. But I'd known and John, we'd known Roger for a long time, and we used to play a lot of Roger Corman movies at the Inwood because if you remember Roger, you may know him from his exploitation, but he was an art house.
He
guy.
raised some of the directors that we still know today.
Yeah.
Ron Howard.
Yeah, but also
Joe Dante.
Yeah.
There's a whole documentary just on the directors that he nourished making those early what were considered quasi B movies, independent films, but he was the training ground for a lot of amazing directors. Paul Bartel.
Yeah.
All these guys that became went on after.
Martin
Martin Scorsese,
Yeah.
exactly. Boxcar Bertha.
But the other thing
Roger Corman.
the other thing Roger did that people don't remember maybe, but he brought the international directors to the States. He bought the rights to Bergman, Fellini, Kurosawa, like major directors. So he would buy the movies for I'm sure he bought them for like $10,000, at the time. But we would play all those movies. I remember playing this at the Inwood. This film by Kurosawa that he made in Russia called Derzu Uzala, and I got the print from New World, right? And it came in a giant truck. It was a 70 millimeter Russian print.
Oh my God!
So I mean, he really did these interesting things. But he had sold the company. We move out. They're out of the film business, and we moved to L.A. and now we have no job. I have no job. Jeannie is pregnant with our first kid, and
your first child.
Yeah,
it's interesting times. An interesting moment, as there are many in your life. Yeah. But I want to go back to Dallas for a moment because I'm still transfixed on this idea. Inwood, Magnolia, Angelica, all of these origin cinemas that are so important, right? That come, I mean, I don't want to say of all places Dallas, but and once again, we New Yorkers, we live on a bit of we literally live on our own island in a sense. But I want to dive into the thrust behind such in a sense, it's almost like a counterculture cinema movement inside of a city that I don't think the rest of America imagines to have this underbelly that's so gritty and incredible, right?
I think a lot of it.
Am I saying something that makes sense to you?
Yeah, no, I think it. I mean, it is. You're saying why there? But,
why there?
But I think it was because at least when we were there was no place to go. I mean, for these type of films. I mean, we'd look at the theaters in New York, and we'd come here sometimes for the festival, but there was nowhere to go, and so it was a way to kind of figure out a way to try and do it. And I found that there was a real audience in these places, really, for independent films. Even early films with you'd play a gay themed film, and all of a sudden it was sold out, and there was anything. So there was an audience hungry for some new films, and you couldn't get them on any other way. It was only theatrical at that point.
And would you say that part of the drive towards the cinema culture of Dallas, in a sense, was that there was a thirst to have an interesting cultural edge, but not necessarily a foundation of opera or theater like you have, or there was that too?
Well,
or what would you say were what was the other part of it? There's certainly a live music world, but
I think I mean it was different. Like Austin had the music, but Dallas there was a high art. There was a museum and opera world there, but there wasn't the film part wasn't considered part of it.
Right.
And if you look at Dallas now, there's all sorts of huge. It's beyond everything in terms of museums and Dallas and Fort Worth.
No, of course, in terms of that, but in terms of live entertainment,
Yeah, it was rare.
You certainly have live music, and I'm sure you have an opera house and all of that. But it's not. Would you say that there was an equivalent hub for small theater and all of that, or did the viral growth come more from cinema?
I think it came from the cinema. I
It
really
came from.
do.
That's what I'm
It
asking.
really did.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, it continued because I think that one of the leaders today in this is Alamo Theaters.
Tim League. Yeah.
And from Austin.
He's out of Austin, exactly. Once again,
there's trouble in Texas. You know, people are stirring it up. So I don't know. It's interesting that these places, all these things have come out of Texas. I think it,
but not from other cities. I mean, I'm not calling it a secondary market, but it's not it's still not the one of the necessarily the key hubs. In a sense, right?
Yeah, we did make it that though.
You made it that.
It really did turn into that.
Yeah, I remember working with Doug McGrath on Infamous. At the same time that I had worked on Capote, and I remember that was shot in Austin and all of that. Yeah. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So now you're in L.A.
Yeah.
And Baby on the Way.
Yeah, we went through different things. I worked for this guy, Lenny Shapiro. I don't know if you've ever run into him. He was a producer and distributor and foreign sales guy who had a company called Shapiro Glickenhaus. And it was a guy in New York, Jim Glickenhaus, who had directed The Exterminator, big exploit, one of the early guys in that. And they wanted to start distribution. So I worked for them a while. Then I worked for this company called Banner Entertainment, which is Mickey Liddell, who is, a really big player now. For example, he has the movie Judy out now.
Okay.
So LD Entertainment's Mickey, but Mickey was a management company at the time with Brian Schwartzstrom, who's a big agent, and they had a lot of clients. They made some movies, and they wanted to distribute. So I was starting it up for them, and at the same time, our old friend at Good Machine, Ted Hope, David Lindy, they had a movie by Todd Solondz called Happiness.
Of course.
That Bingham Ray was going to distribute at October.
Right.
October's owned by Universal. When they read the reviews out of Cannes, they just forbid the film to ever come out.
Subject matter.
Subject matter. I don't think they'd seen it. I'm sure they haven't. But they read the reviews and were just like, no, not that is not happening. So Good Machine hired me to create, essentially out of my office at Banner, because we had no movies at the time. So I started distributing Happiness just really out of my house.
And now, critical moment, really, right? There are a certain amount of people in the film industry that do what we know to be the service deal. Mm-hmm. And you were right there. This was the seed, right?
Yeah.
For what would become a rocket ship.
Yeah, essentially saying,
because you were working on your own.
Yeah, it was essentially saying all the gatekeepers said no, and so I figured out a way. I'll just do it myself. I won't. And to producers, and so Happiness worked, and it was very successful and got good reviews. And then from that, I got a call from these two British bankers, Will Tyrer and Chris Ball. They had this Newmarket Capital Group, and they said, could you come over and watch this movie? And they showed me Memento by Chris Nolan. They had financed the film. They were previously doing gap financing, and this was one they fully financed. And I was like, it's amazing. What do you want me to do? And they go, no, you don't understand. We can't get any distribution on this film.
Amazing.
No one will do it.
Critical moment.
Yeah. So they ended up putting up the money, and I did the same thing
for print and advertising.
Yeah. And we made it Newmarket Films. Again, I was doing it out of my house, essentially. And at the same time, I got a call from Jonathan Searing here in New York to start IFC Films. They wanted to start a distribution company. And I was like, this is great, but I'm already doing Memento, I can't, I don't want to not do it. And they were like, fine, just do it at the same time. You can do that on the side. We have Chris's earlier film following at IFC, so that'd be great. So I ended up doing.
You were able to do that under the old label.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously enter into IFC.
Yeah. So I had started IFC Films, and it was all in New York. We had to move to New York, but we stayed in LA for about a year doing this, and then we all moved here and fully started IFC Films.
Was that sort of under Inwood Films at that time, or
it was? Yeah, well,
Inwood/Banner.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It was sort of, it was all mixed. Like the entity, we always called it Inwood, but we did Memento under Newmarket Films, and then IFC.
But you personally were Inwood.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That was your own incorporated entity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Which is great. Still is.
It exists today.
Yeah, it's still.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
That and BERNEY Films, of course. Yeah, all of that. Yeah. So interesting. Okay, and then with IFC now, what happens is you're with a group that under Dolan, in any case at the time, were also the owners of Clearview Cinema, and they hung on to that for a bit, and then this obviously gave birth to what became the transition from the Waverly to the IFC Cinema.
Yeah,
and you were there for that and its origins.
Well,
correct?
I early on. So first of all, IFC was they had started production, right, and then
they started to make movies.
They started to make movies, and then they with Carolyn Kaplan,
right,
and Jonathan, and then they brought me in to do distribution. So we also were to acquire films. So one of the first films we acquired was Y Tu Mamá También by Alfonso Cuarón. And it was sort of the outlier. That film, other distributors thought it couldn't be rated or it would be rated X, and they didn't want to deal with it. And the movie, it's very sexy. We ended up just not rating it, just going out unrated, and it really broke out, not only for Alfonso but for the cast. I just watched it again with Gael and
I love
Diego.
that. I love that film. It's an amazing film.
Holds up.
But going out unrated, were there cinema barriers for distribution? I don't.
No, not really.
Because there weren't, right? No,
it wasn't bad.
They were allowed.
Yeah, unrated meant
that
you just showed it to them. You just showed it to the theaters, and they decided. Like the MPA didn't like unrated because you're not participating in their, in their group, but you could do it if the theaters looked at the movie and they saw that movie and they said that, this movie is brilliant and sweet. Actually, it had a tone. The tonal, well, it was sweet and melancholy, and no one had a problem with it. It did become, I think, a great date night movie. It was one of the early, sexy date night movies.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's, it was amazing. At the same time, they had made a movie, IFC had made a movie called Monsoon Wedding with Mira.
With Mira, yeah, of course.
And we were going to distribute that film as well because they produced it. But there was a lot of third-party financiers, and we had to renegotiate and do a lot of stuff at Cannes. And then we all toasted champagne at Cannes, and it's all great. Next day, I wake up, and they go, well, we thought about it. We don't want to risk it. We sold it off to somebody else. Monsoon Wedding. I was like,
oh my God.
And so that was the first sign that I thought, I don't know if this is going to long-term work. And they
under that group. Yeah.
I mean, and I get it. They're a big cable company, and
that's right.
Film business is,
and a broadcaster.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of a utility. Right. I mean,
in a sense.
Taking these big swings,
And they sold off Bravo to they sold it off to because they had control of Bravo, which was a very important channel.
Oh yeah. So they said, look, what we want you to do, the new plan, basically is we'll give you zero budget to buy films and zero to put them out. How about that?
Sounds great.
I was
When
like-
when do I start?
And I was like, and they go, no, that's the plan. Like, so you need to find some producers to do a service deal or find money. We don't want to risk it. We're just like,
Might as well have been doing Inwood. It was at that point, right? It was
Yeah.
no reason to raise anyone else's flag at that point. Yeah.
So the film that we found was My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, my
We
God.
found through a weird set of circumstances that the rights had been split, and the producers of even though it was made by HBO, the investors owned the international rights and the theatrical rights.
Domestic theatrical.
Domestic, and no one ever thought it would be theatrical. Like, no one ever thought about that. And so I think even HBO, like at the time, they were like, no, we made it for HBO. Like, what are you talking about?
Oh, they didn't think of it as a theatrical
they never
film.
did.
They didn't imagine it that way.
No.
Okay.
And
Which is nuts.
but they also, it was the same thing. They'd showed it to a lot of people, and everyone was like, no, it is not theatrical. Absolutely, because it's got a bunch of it's for an older audience. They don't go to movies. The movies are for kids. Like, they don't go. And also, it was kind of it was just perceived as a TV movie.
$240 million later.
So
I mean, like, what
So
up?
anyway, it fit the bill of there was a third-party financer, there was no risk, and I mean it just went through the roof. And we had, with Tom Hanks and Gary Getzman, worked. They believed in the project, and they believed in this unique way of distributing the film, which was to keep it very limited, no matter, even in success. Like, we started good, and it held and held, and we held it to 500 screens. We never went, and everyone was going, go wide, but Gary Getzman, Tom, they were all in agreement that, like, we'll just keep it the same, and it sold out, and it's a comedy, and just keep it like a phenomenon, like where you knew where to go. It's almost like you didn't have to name the theater in each town. It's like, let's go to Greek Wedding. Okay. You didn't have to tell anybody where it was. And we kept it from April to August in 500 screens, which has never been done. And then we went wide.
Crazy.
And it kept going. It was still one of the top indie films of all time. And we kept worrying about the big movies that were going to wipe us out and push us off screen. We'd have to have a call every week, like, okay, the early summer movies are coming in. We're going to be dead. And then the early summer movies came and went. We were still there. Then it was like, well, the June movies were dead. They all came and went. Greek Wedding's still playing. Finally, at the end of the year, they're like, we're really worried about the Christmas movies. This was like a year later. And I go, don't worry now. We've made it through every season and lasted longer than any film. So
Crazy.
It's a blast.
And those deals that you did on the service deals, unlike the studio deals, were they descending scale over time for where the theater benefited from a longer run? How did the service deals work? Because there was that whole 90-10 thing, and I never really understood, and all of that.
It really wasn't even. I mean, obviously, the longer a film played, traditionally the better it is for exhibitors, because the longer it goes, the less film rental they had to pay.
Right.
And so it was really successful, but yet at the same time, something playing that long for the producers, for the distributors, is great too. So anytime a film just continues, it's
and
good
the
for
theater
everybody.
and the theater owners also, of course, benefit because everybody's winning.
Plus, it was an unheard of new audience. In other words, the fact that they thought that no older audience would come to theaters at that time was incredible, because of course they did. They weren't making any movies for the audience, and so once they put a movie out for, I mean, there they were. That it was good. Like, I remember here the old Beekman Theater, that was on
Beekman, sure.
Yeah. So go by there, and normally there was like, instead of a rack of there was, instead of a rack of skateboards or bikes, I saw a giant pile of walkers out in front of the theater, like, So
Yeah, you know your audience, don't you?
The audience was there. It's like, it was amazing. It was like they're showing up. They're barely getting there, but they got there.
They're going to the movies. Yeah,
So.
yeah. So now you've run a bit of a course at IFC, and then the next is Newmarket.
Yeah, the
right?
next is Newmarket, because with the, I decided the Newmarket guys after Memento really wanted to do it, but I was already at IFC, and they came back and said, let's do a formal company rather than the out of the,
because you had already been with them at that point. Yeah, right.
So we formed Newmarket Films, and I left IFC and formed Newmarket, and which was great. That was the first time that was really a true partnership with really great partners in my own company. And we had some wonderful films. We started out with Real Women Have Curves. That was an HBO production that they wanted to try the theatrical market, which was nice. And we got a lot of reviews. And then we had a wonderful film called Whale Rider that still is a classic today, in my opinion, I think. That was another film that my partners and I, Will Tyra, we saw at the Toronto Film Festival. And it was one of the late films in the festival. And as far as I can remember, everybody walked out in about 15 minutes, the distributors, and no one stayed till the end. It was one of those films that just, by the end of it, the whole audience was standing up, applauding and crying. And,
wow.
And we had that, and then we had another service deal from Mel Gibson, so The Passion of the Christ.
Which is now the... now it goes to the top of the charts for box office all time. Yeah.
Because they had, my partners had funded in their banking careers some icon films, so they knew they had worked with Mel and Bruce Davey before, and then so they had the connection. So, and it was in that. So their company put up all the money to release the film, and it was like through the roof. It's so funny because going back to
2,000 screens.
We were almost on with the number of prints. It was closer to 3,500, 4,000, and the guy that
blanketing North America
everywhere. When the guy that I mentioned earlier, Leroy Mitchell, we leased the Inwood from. He then was now the chairman of Cinemark, and they were huge. I mean, they're now the third largest. And I remember they called and they said they had a big multiplex, 24 screens by their office in Plano, Texas, which is in the suburb of Dallas in the north. And they're like, listen, Bob, we want this on all 24 screens. We'll be opening The Passion. I was like, all 24? And they go, yeah, all of them. And not only at all the theaters, but in this theater, all the screens.
Unbelievable.
And I was like,
you were controlling an entire region.
But it was funny because I was like, I thought they were crazy, but okay. And they go, oh, and by the way, we're going to open it. Our first shows will be at 6 a.m. It's like, okay. And then remember when we opened on Rent Track, where you get the live real-time grosses start coming in at 6, and it was just like unbelievable. Like, it was just,
you couldn't believe the audience volume
was
starting screenings in the morning at 6. I mean, I think that's unprecedented. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, it was unbelievable. So it was quite the experience.
Yeah,
like operationally because we had a small team. We had 20 people, and we were releasing a film on probably closer to 4,000. And I think the
logistics alone,
I think the industry thought we could not do it. We were gonna fail. We were gonna drop the ball somehow. We just couldn't do it because at the time, all the studios, they had 400 and 500 people doing this at each studio. And so, for me, just operationally, we were really proud, and the whole team just to get it was pretty amazing.
One of the things I'm interested in that, and I can't remember the backstory on it, but part of the way, if my memory is correct, that you did some of the marketing was you sort of seeded throughout the houses of worship
Yeah.
in the U.S.
Yeah.
so that you were able to effectively get a following from the church, right? In a
Yeah.
sense,
No, and that had been
which was really unusual for a film to be able to do that,
yeah.
right?
I mean, it was almost like more like a political campaign, and that was really Mel and a lot of his team that really did that from early on. Showed people part of the film, and let it spread. It was amazing.
So they contributed to that viral marketing then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And were your team doing it simultaneously, or his
Yeah.
icon?
And we worked-
It was all hands on deck, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we all worked together, and we, the film was, in Aramaic. I mean, it was in subtitles. So,
Imagine that, right?
I mean,
and
so
the audience is
originally-
outrageous. Yeah.
And originally, I think even Mel and the icon thought, well, it's in subtitles. We'll have to go small. It's like a foreign film. And everyone was like, no. I was like, no. This is Braveheart, Jesus. And we have to go big all the way. And luckily they went with it.
And how long was that run? I mean, Greek Wedding obviously was for a forever run.
The
I can't remember. My memory was
it lasted a long time. I think people thought that it was just a phenomenon at first, that that everybody would go, like sort of the religious community or the Catholic community would go, and that would be it. But it really held in for like a solid 8-10 weeks, and it didn't drop. I think people were amazed that it held on, and it was. I mean, I think it was controversial, and there was people, no matter what you thought, definitely, I think, general agreement that it was well directed, like Mel did. He's an amazing director, and it worked, and it kept going. So it had legs, as they say, not in the Greek Wedding, but it held on. It wasn't like a 2-week in and out movie.
No, it ran. It ran.
Yeah,
it ran.
Yeah.
And then, so now these two successes, and then a bunch of other films, and Newmarket is rolling, and you've got a reasonably long journey with them before Picture House.
Yeah.
The transition from Newmarket to Picture House was a transition also that included a relationship with a broadcaster. Once again, so now you go from purely theatrical now to a blend of broadcast and theatrical. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in a sense, this was seasoning for what the future would be with a streaming connection, but with a world that still had a full theatrical window, and the day and date when Picture House was starting had not taken hold yet.
That's right.
And that was a very important ingredient, as I would imagine, at the time, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you would release, and then am I right in saying that HBO had the right to take it, or was it the other way around? They had the right to or they were going to broadcast each one. I can't remember.
Well, it was a little different. So it was a combination. So that we sold the Newmarket, Newmarket films to HBO and New Line Cinema.
Right.
And what happened was that at HBO, they were looking to get their films, some of their films are theatrical, their indie films into theaters, or thinking about that. And at the same time, New Line was wanting to revamp their indie unit.
Pipeline.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then, of course, they're both owned by Time Warner. So I think it was like, you guys, they were both talking to us separately. So then Time Warner said, why don't you just both go in and do it together? So it ended up being a 50-50 partnership between HBO and New Line that bought Newmarket. And then it was up to each.
And then it was the Picture House label.
And
right.
we called it Picture House.
Right.
And so it was up to each partner whether to participate in films. Like HBO could have one of their films, and HBO New Line would have to agree to split the cost of
and
releasing
also
it.
and also the methodology, right?
Yeah.
Because if there was something that would be a New Line release, then there would be a waiting period before an HBO broadcast.
Yeah, it was still.
There was still the windows were all
it was
there.
traditional.
So
Like,
the traditional windows were all there. There were no overlaps.
right.
But New
Yeah.
Line didn't have to get it. You were open to sell into the open market for anything that you made, or no?
It was we distributed everything ourselves directly at
Right,
Picture House.
right.
And New Line was really our financial backer, and we could use their international, or we could make movies with New Line, and at the same time, HBO could present their movies to us to release, or we could all go in on a movie together, and I would have to go to each team and see if they could do it. So when I wanted to make a movie or buy a movie, I had to see if either New Line or HBO or both would do it. And so, for example, when we got the script for Pan's Labyrinth
I remember
Guillermo del
that.
Toro,
Yeah.
we had to go to both companies, and the it was in Spanish, it was period, it was dark, violent,
A fantasy.
a
yeah.
fantasy,
Yeah.
or maybe, and then the last movie, the Spanish language movie that Guillermo did before that, grossed 100,000, I think, in the U.S. And
God.
so they were like
Hesitant.
So New Line, Michael Lynn and Bob Shea, they were like, there's all these things, dark and everything, but they go, but Guillermo had done Blade 2 for them, so they go, okay, like we don't quite get it, but we know Guillermo is a pro and can do it. So they were supportive. And then the HBO side was like, well, let's wait and see. I don't know. And so we made it without, Michael Lynn.
Without a definitive plan.
Without
at the
a
beginning?
definitive plan from HBO. And Michael Lynn, who just passed away this year, wonderful guy who had said, he would say, look, we'll do it all, and you guys at HBO can come in, you can decide later. He was sort of like, he just wanted to get this done. He was going to take all the responsibility. And, that film turned out to be a masterpiece.
Of course, yeah.
And successful beyond belief. It really was. So it worked out.
Worked out very well. Yeah. So the whole idea now, once again, you're living in a space with multiple arms again, right? And this is still a pre-streaming era entity.
Yeah.
And then now after that, there's a period of time that goes for Picture House before Amazon.
Yeah.
But the idea was to keep rolling as the entity that you were, and then was there? I'm trying to remember. Is there a gap between the two things?
Yeah.
Or no? There was a gap after Picture House.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, one interesting thing about when you talk about the streaming world, it was right at the beginning. So even though Picture House was owned by HBO, they had an output deal, for pay from HBO. However, like a lot of those companies, they disqualified documentaries, black and white films, and foreign language films. So at the time, Pan's Labyrinth did not qualify for the pay deal. So I was like, well, yeah, but you own part of us, and can we make a deal somehow with somebody? And they go, yeah, try. So we went out and did a deal, one of the first deals with Netflix.
For Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth, which kind of is interesting because that started the streaming deal.
But it's after the release that you do this.
Yeah.
So it's not that blend where a Netflix origin project is competing with its theatrical self. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but
it's
what
not day and date.
It's not day and day, but what it was the first time that, like, all of a sudden, like, they were aggressive about
about that was a player in the marketplace.
Yeah. So it was the beginning of Netflix.
Right.
And Pan's Labyrinth was one of their early big successes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
but after that, I went to we started. We had a brief time. We started a film called a company called Apparition, which we did Jane Campion's film Bright Star, and a couple other ones. And it was Bill Polad was the owner of the company and producer and a director. So he really ended up going on to be a director.
And he did Love and Mercy,
yeah.
of course. Yeah, the
Which
Beach
was-
Boys film, which is a brilliant film.
It's an amazing film, and you know, I think that his vocation was to be a director, not a distributor. So, and after that, we formed, and this is a lot with the same team I've had all along in terms of distribution, Film District, which was part of Graham King's company. So Graham King and his
label. Yeah.
his label, and Tim Haddington is his partner. And we did some really interesting movies. They were all wide releases. We did the first Insidious that became like you know, it's now spawned like a whole universe. If you think about it, with James Wan. And that was a Toronto midnight film that afterwards, the first Insidious scared everybody at midnight, but then it kind of ran out of steam a bit. Like somehow in the end, the buyers and the audience were walking out like, well, I don't know. It just, like, it was scary, but then we ended up giving them the money to re-edit the ending a bit, and with no guarantee of a theatrical release, but then they did, and we tested it, and it went through the roof. It was really, and we also did a wonderful film, one of my favorites, called Drive, which was, you know, Refn's breakthrough film with Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was great, very controversial. You know, we went wide and sort of, there was a lot of elements of a Fast and Furious to that movie, but it was definitely a Refn, you know, movie, you know, with very little dialogue and, you know, interesting tone and music, and it caught on and had just amazing sort of, Ryan was known, but this really put him, you know, out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in all of this, you're dialing into the journey, your knowledge of demographics, theaters, neighborhoods, places where things are going to succeed is so dialed in as to what films will succeed and where and how, right?
Well, it's part of it. I think being starting out as a theater guy and exhibitor, I think definitely helped me connect to the audience, you know, and I think the community aspect of the Inwood Theater is totally relevant to today's, you know, online communities and sort of trying to make things an event. And I think that's, so it sort of has followed through. I think if you look at the movies today, you have to have an event quality to it to get people to show up, you know, if you're not a Marvel movie. So you have to try and create that and get the actors and everybody to do events and streams and, you know, and to make it special. You know?
But also, you know, this whole idea of streaming and then the social environment of the theater is still both have a water cooler dialogue to them, right? I mean, people still talk about it, but the experience of the cinema is not there for that. So as we move forward year by year with the stream, because the streamers really have enabled the middle budget, or the 20, 30 million less, slightly more, to reflourish in a post theatrical window home video world.
Yep.
And here we are today. But what about movie theaters today?
Well, I think
how do you feel?
Look, I think there are definite challenges, but the whole business is, I think, pretty strong. I mean, you look at the Marvel and Disney. Obviously, they're so big. They rely on theatrical. But I do think that middle budget, you know, if it's not an event, it is tough. But if you look at the numbers of good films that break through, there's cycles. If you have a couple mediocre films and don't work, I think the industry pundits tend to go, well, it's over. You know, business is over. And then all of a sudden a hit comes in and business is back. So I think it's challenged. But look, like I read today, Apple comes out and says they're going to do traditional theatrical on their films. So here's
for their streaming entity.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Tell me more about that.
Well, it didn't say all of them, but it definitely said they're going to do. They were talking about Sofia Coppola's film they have. So they're going to do theatrical releases.
A theatrical window as well, not a day and date.
Right. So, and if you look at, obviously at Amazon, most of our films were traditional window theatrical. And it's changed a bit now, but there's still some kind of theatrical. And Netflix has actually gone from saying they're never going to do theatrical to doing quite a bit, even though it's
having a theatrical window, not doing day and date. Right.
So
they've done a slight reverse influence. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the big directors, obviously, look for Alfonso and for Marty's movie. I mean, they're doing it may not be traditional, but they're doing some theatrical, right? So, I think that I think there's hope. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of films that could obviously be made and benefited by going straight to streaming too, because I think it does give filmmakers and producers much more. There's more films being made now than any time.
Right.
So I don't think it'll go away. I think the exhibitors have to stand up and make the experience good. If you don't, I think you'll be, in a rough spot, right? So, the Alamos or the AMCs that have up, all the theaters, I think even the circuits
upping the game
and making it better. So, there'll be some kind of pricing or subscription, models that make it work. But hopefully, ultimately, a younger audience can discover these things. And, I'm pretty, if you look at A24, Neon, and to some degree, it looks like Searchlight. Searchlight's going to remain a positive, I think, theatrical focus. So I'm pretty upbeat, even though everyone starts to worry about it. But I think if you can be flexible with films, as a distributor, some films go here and there, and there's no rules anymore. Even though there seems to be hard and fast rules, and the exhibitors try. I think the rules are pretty flexible, and they're going to get more flexible.
Cool. I want to go back now because we've talked a lot about the business and about your journey in distribution. Yeah. I have great memories, really, actually together, specifically when I was working with Steve Shainberg after he did Secretary, and you pursued that to work with him on Fur, and then sort of the relationships that you've cultivated over the years directly with filmmakers that you've kept as part of your life. Talk a little bit about that for me.
Well, I mean, I think you bond when you do these, particularly these early films, excuse me, that other distributors or producers may not have seen the value. So, for example, on Pan's Labyrinth, it was such a great journey with Guillermo, and we've stayed in touch, and we've done projects together after that, and hope to another one with Charlize Theron
because
on Monster,
which goes way back,
way back, and a lot of these people have been so wonderful to work with because they particularly Charlize, Guillermo, they remember those days and the struggle to get to that, and that people weren't understanding what the value of these things. So I think a lot of it is sort of meeting the people and staying in touch, and those companies, the companies can kind of evolve and change, but there's always the talent that's there.
And you also did a film years ago with Nicole the Woodsman, right?
Yeah.
I've lost touch with her. I actually worked a little bit on that in post back then. There were so many filmmakers, right?
Well, Nicole has done a lot of, I think, quite a bit of television, but also the interesting thing about the
Hofstetter, is that her last name? I can't remember her last name.
We'll
that's a lookup. Yeah, it's with an H. Yeah, I should remember that. I know. That's okay.
But we'll look it up. Other thing about The Woodsman that was interesting, the producer was Lee Daniels.
Lee Daniels, who I've worked with a lot over the years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
If you think about that, it's just all the way. And of course, on that one, Kevin Bacon and Kira were both. I mean, that was a really great project.
Incredible
really
film.
well. Yeah.
Because you were dealing with such a hard thing to
tough.
present.
Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah.
But it was it had, the people involved with it are all amazing.
Yeah. And others. Tell me about others that are actors and actresses that you feel, and directors specifically that you feel that have sort of been a part of your thread.
Well, also the thread was Nick Refn.
Nick Refn.
We've done a lot with, like Drive, I think, was a pivotal film for him, and we've done a lot since then, including at Amazon, which I wasn't directly involved with, but sort of probably he did a big series,
Right.
like a 15-hour movie,
Right.
Yeah.
While you were there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Neon Demon. So, if it's been really amazing. Alfonso
Cuarón.
we still keep in touch. Sort of like on and on. You sort of, I hope, a lot of these directors have gone on to like mega studio, but they tend to come back. I mean, if you look at Alfonso, who then came back and did Roma, it's amazing that they return to these sort of important,
sort of
personal films.
simpler films. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if Roma is simple,
But not simple. No, well, but not. It's not a.
Yeah.
It's not the same dimension and size
Yeah.
of the other ones,
It's
right?
a personal story.
Yeah. So, going back to when you met Jeannie
Yeah.
in Austin, you were working at the theater.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
In Dallas. Well,
Yeah.
Jeannie was working in sort of corporate publicity, but on the side, she managed a band, and I think because she had an American Express card, she was the manager, or something, like in a band. So she wanted to rent the theater for the band to do a big concert and fashion show. So that's how we met.
That's
Like
amazing. And it was and you guys you guys hosted the show.
We did.
Yeah.
And she has, she ran Rogers and Cowan publicity in New York and LA. When we moved to New York, they let her run it from here. And she also then, after that, was at the Film Society.
Lincoln Center.
So she sort of got a great, master degree in film from Richard Pena over there.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, we still keep in touch with the New York Film Festival and show up. We at Amazon, we did a lot of, support and sponsorship for film festivals, which was another thing that I loved being able to do at Amazon is to really support a lot of the film festivals because they need it. I think as the business has changed, theatrical, so the film festival business too.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, right? Yeah. I mean, the dialogue that goes on now at Cannes.
Yeah, and it's interconnected.
There's a bit of warfare there with streaming, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that a bit, because I want to hear your snapshot, having been a regular attendee over the years, and how that inhabits in the business and how it maybe flexes a little bit as well.
Well, at Amazon, I've been at going to Cannes forever, but at Amazon, since we were doing traditional theatrical, we were the immediately beloved by Cannes, because we were fitting into, what they in France was the formula, right? And so we were immediately, we had, I think our first year at Amazon, we had 5 or 6 films selected. And, I think these films are selected because they're great, but also, we were really honoring the theatrical tradition. Same way at CinemaCon, that we were doing that. And, it's really more about the French system that, the pressure from the industry that I think Cannes sort of had to go along with trying to restrict streamer films
and they have a very strong independent cinema culture, do they not? Right? Like in the city of Paris.
Oh yeah.
Incredible amount of small non-chain independent theaters. It's not that the cities have abandoned them, but let's look at here in New York as an example. We got Film Forum, we got Metrograph, maybe Upper West. You've got a few. You've got BAM. What I mean, but
Yeah, but in
the
France,
theater business. Yeah,
in France though, it's really the government and their support. So in other words, all the ticket prices include a tax that then goes to local production. So it's an intertwined system. And when you go in and try and disrupt a system like that, it's tricky, and it flows to everything. So from the industry to the festivals, so they're going to have to deal with it, right? Because the world's changing. So, but Netflix was they weren't going to cave at the beginning.
But the thing that Netflix is doing that's fascinating, that I'm not sure if anyone else is at the same level, is they've reversed out their organization to make local content in the cities.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I've been watching, I watched this thing called Call My Agent. It's called Deep Son. Yeah. It's this little series that's on Netflix. And I'm like, wow,
no, they've been very smart about
they're making local language content in the cities that they're delivering the volume of content that comes out of North America.
Well, it's another way to, I think if in other words, if you're going to disrupt the French system in a way, you have to do something else. So they are providing production funding for local. So I think it's just a different way, and it's going to take some time for all these, sort of very entrenched systems in a place like France that has such a great movie industry, and and they've protected it over the years, and it's one of those really.
But they get
strong.
to do it in the UK. They get to do it in Germany. They get to do it in Belgium.
Yeah,
they're doing a fair amount, from what I understand, out of their Madrid setup in Spain. It's
and
which is fantastic. Yeah,
Amazon doing the same thing, like in India and Germany and Japan.
Creating or acquiring local content. Creating.
Making
it. See, I was unclear on while you were there. That mission was launching.
Yeah, it was more through the series stuff. So I wasn't directly involved, but I
got
saw
it through TV series.
But I saw, that they're really being. There's some real successes, and so they're going. Netflix I think has been doing it longer, but these other. That's going to be interesting to see what happens with all the different streaming services, because the global strategy also disrupts the typical markets, the AFM, can, and everything. If you just make one sale, the idea of selling territory by territory by territory, the traditional model is completely disrupted.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that foreign sales model, right? Yeah. Foreign pre-sales was a financing model for domestic production in the U.S. How is our world working in that way from where you sit? Because my understanding with all of my friends who are in the producing world is that does not have the strength with minimum guarantees and pre-sales and sort of the foreign sales debt financing model.
Yeah, it's different. I think it's
changed a bit, hasn't it?
It's cooled off. It's harder unless you have, incredible IP or cast or specific genre that's just almost, bulletproof, right? It is tougher. But the other thing that's happened is you do pre-sell your film in a lot of places, and then a streamer comes along and goes, I'm going to give you X for the whole world, and it's way more money. So then what you have to do is go back and get out of those deals to take it. So so then you're more wary to take the deals, thinking that maybe the global deal is going to happen. So it's become interesting. A lot of sales agents have one of the tough parts of their job is to now unwind the deals that they made because they just got a bigger deal, and it's going to make everybody having to be really flexible as they make these pre-deals. So there's got to have to be a way out. So
and there's got to be an exit for all of the regional sales that they do that are foreign territory sales.
Yeah, an exit or not. So it's made it very difficult, and the rules are completely changing.
Would some of those foreign streaming deals exclude theatrical?
Probably most of them would.
Okay, that's what that's the ingredient that needs to shake out then.
Not only theatrical, but also, in many cases transactional too. So TVOD, like they don't, so
Oh, so they won't let them have the what would be
Yeah.
pay-per-view.
yeah, or,
That-
or
that-
traditional video.
That gets
Yeah.
taken away, or video distribution.
Yeah, so it could, it's
Like
all
hard
evolving.
media.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about hard media right now.
Well, I mean,
Let's talk about. I've never get into a discussion with anyone about Blu-ray because I don't know about you, but I think about my own life right now and the way I view, and you live in a New York apartment, you don't have much space, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, what do I want to have all those discs for of every movie? Because I'm like a collector, so I've built a bit of a library, for lack of what I would necessarily want on my iTunes setup for my Apple TV, and I've bought them to be able to play again and again without having to have a disc.
yeah.
And
Well-
talk a little bit about like where that market is, since there's really no rental per se. It's more of a, what's
Well,
the
it's-
foundation for
it's-
that business now?
I mean, obviously it's declining, but it's not as fast as everybody thinks. If I think when you mentioned New York and LA, but everywhere else, there still is.
There's still video
There's
stores?
still not stores, but Walmart and online rental, like Walmart and Amazon.
Right.
On
So
the transactional
sales.
are still big, and even in a lot of places, Redbox, where there's a machine in front of a store, and it's still there. Like
Is that a rental or a buy? That's
a rental.
Oh, that's a rental. Okay. See,
yeah.
listen, I'm
it's
learning.
still-
Like I don't know about really.
I mean, obviously it's declining, but it's not gone, and there's actually
brick
quite
and
a
mortar.
bit of-
Brick and mortar has been replaced by some of these other
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
But still in the transactional video on demand TVOD, it's still there, and you've seen obviously consolidation with all the studios. For example, Universal, Warner, all their home entertainment divisions it's more global, and they're buying things and claim, but it's still there. It's sort of a managed end, right? But it could take a long time. But it's sort of consolidating, managing the end of that big business. But think about it. The other thing that's just amazing that's happening with the streamers is, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen both Seinfeld, Friends sell to streamers for more money than
they were in syndication.
Yeah, which was also the record. They thought it would never be repeated, ever. Impossible. And boom, it was. So,
Right.
So, it's amazing how it is changing, and it's another cycle. But the old ones are still there, managing either downward or changing, like theatrical. I wouldn't say it's, it obviously is declining a bit, but yet the numbers are still very, very strong.
Well, you have cinephile labels like Criterion that are still around.
Yeah.
How in your mind does a company that's a boutique company, a smaller company in a sense, Janus Films, Criterion, how does that fit into the ecosystem of today with streaming? They're a high quality restoration company as well, right?
Yeah, I think it is interesting when you look at what happened to, Filmstruck and some of these other things that didn't make it. But I think it'll find out. I think maybe you've seen a lot of things through like channels, either Amazon or these other streamers, ways that smaller companies can utilize bigger streaming companies and have, so I think it'll shake out. It's very tough to make your own, small boutique streamer on your own. It's just really tough.
Although I ran into one recently in downtown in my old building at 110 Leroy Street.
Yeah.
There's a company called Ammo Content. Have you heard of them?
No. In fact, I think I might have seen the sign walking by Leroy, but
They're a streamer.
yeah.
They're and they go to festivals to acquire.
Yeah. No, I mean,
They operate on the outskirts of town, if you will, right?
yeah. No, as technology improves, or you look at a company like Mubi in London that not only does high quality streaming films, but they also occasionally do their own theatrical. Like they did one of our films, Suspiria, they did a
That was one of your Amazon distributed films, yeah.
But they in UK, Movie did it as a theatrical and then a small streaming deal afterwards. So, well, I guess the answer is there's no rules, and all these, everyone's like, well, why don't we do this? Okay, it's more experimental now, I think, than ever, even with the big companies. Like they have to really, change and be flexible about what they do to make it work.
Right.
Yeah.
So for you, Mr. Berney,
Yeah.
What's you've been taking a break?
Yeah,
which is awesome.
Taking a nice break, but I'm not quitting. I'm not.
Oh no, nor would I expect.
So it's try to figure out the next step, and in all this changing thing, where is the opportunity and the chaos? Right, everything's upended, and people don't know what's happening. But there's always opportunities within that changing, and I think if I just don't want to be afraid of any of the changes and try and figure out how to best keep doing it and keep working with top directors and producers, and I still firmly believe in the theatrical business too. So all my friends in exhibition, I think there's real hope for that. And
I'm
also
so
with
glad you're
marketing.
saying that
Yeah.
because I've really wanted to have a conversation with Tim League, who I intend to have join me one of these days.
You have to, yeah.
A must, right?
Yeah, a must.
And I've attended a couple of the art house conferences that happened before Sundance.
Yeah.
And it's so wonderful
Yeah.
to be in a community of people who are talking about the impact of independent cinemas. And that what was the sort of the core kind of keynote statement about that? Independent cinema chains and art house theaters help the property values of a community when it's in a certain area, right?
Yeah.
They impact the entire fabric and culture, right?
Yeah, they do.
Of an area. And I think about the idea of the hinterland aspect of cinema that has been approached by a number of players in the business, and all of the variety of content that they've come up with as ideas. For instance, like, I don't know if Richard was doing it or not, Richard Bromwitz, but there was a gentleman who was at Art House that was talking about and executing, delivering the Metropolitan Opera to places where people would pay for a ticket and show up to see the opera from the Met, like as a night out, dressed up and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's like, when I think about the use of the venues and what it's getting used for, and just the overall survival and health of theaters, and then everything that you do with them that can continue.
Well, the opera thing is a good example, and both, Regal, AMC, and Alamo particularly, they all do live stream Q&As, which enable these sort of special events in Los Angeles or New York to be seen, live at all their other locations, which makes, enables to do an event-tized screening somewhere else. So I think, and I think it's true of the bigger circuits too. They need to respond. I would say that they want another audience besides just the, Disney Marvel audience. They need the other audience to make it work.
And you mentioned a bit ago about Apple announcing what they're going to do.
Yeah.
I haven't kept my ears out in regards to Disney's intention with their streaming model, but I think it's pretty clear they're still theatrical and they still are going to do their own stuff, right?
I mean, I think it's more separate. Like, I don't think
that's a different business.
It's a different business. I don't think it's like they're going to not, put their big movies in theaters. However,
of course, yeah.
However, I think their streamer, it looks like they're going to be able to take spin-offs and other strands and expand their universe on streaming. And I think, it looks like HBO Max is going to do the same thing. And, Comcast, I don't know as much about it, but it looks like it's more of a advertising supported.
So in connection, HBO Max under what is now the Warner Media model, which is owned by AT&T, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a new business entity to itself. And then Comcast, of course, is NBC Universal. Am I right still? Yeah. So these are all of the arms of the majors evolving.
Yeah. evolving in a whole new model, just like when, VHS or DVD changed the whole economics of the business. This is now doing the same thing.
Right. And we're right at the beginning.
Yeah. No, it's fun. It's fun to be at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because there aren't
Because
the
nothing's
hard and
happened.
fast rules
And
yet.
it hasn't happened.
We can get away with stuff right now,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of now, so now we have a massive infrastructure happening in our domestic business, which is also a global business, of course, but it's still, these are domestic companies. What do you see of the reaction? Because you're pretty dialed into the international market. What happens in the rest of the world that watches us go through these changes?
Well, I think it's
and how do they react?
I think it's very scary to them. If you look at France, that of course has robust business of their own, and they've always, the idea that these streamers are trying to come in and tell them what to do and how to change their own model is, they don't love that. And then the streamers are all U.S. companies.
Exactly.
So,
That's what I'm thinking.
So they're like, it's double bad, right? It's like, wait a minute. Here are all these huge U.S. companies coming into our markets and trying to, so I understand they're really defensive about it, and they have their own business, and it's always been that way, right? For the big U.S. studios pressuring. So, but when you talked about local productions and everything, that's really what has to happen. I think it has to be a win-win somehow. So
that's what's new.
Yeah.
It's financial fuel going into local markets and creating original language content for their audience.
Yeah.
And then if they can show it in the U.S., great. If they can't, fine.
Right, but then it's going to be how are the revenues split? How's it going to work? In terms of the logistics of all this, in terms of streaming and the rights in each country, and if you're a customer in one country and you travel to somebody else to another country, can you access that? How easily?
Right, the crossing borders with common platforms.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the other thing,
which was an issue with things like a Pandora as an example.
Yeah.
If you travel to Europe, or at least if you traveled to Europe a number of years ago, you tried to turn on your Pandora, and it's like, no, you can't play that here.
Right. So that
I don't even know right now what I even don't know what the rules are for your U.S. subscriptions.
Well, that's the issue. Is like there are different rules, different places with different countries and companies. So if you're a customer in France, and you have the rights to a certain title on a streaming service, but then you drive over to Belgium, but you can't watch it. But maybe some titles have French rights in Belgium, so it's very difficult, and that's
to manage in that system in the countries that are all the EU
and all the protections. So that sort of pushes you to make an overall global deal with somebody, so you have to worry about that. But that's going to take some time, both technically, how do you do that? Maybe you can do it. Maybe if you're a customer in France and you have a certain password, you could go to Spain and watch it because you're a French customer. You're just in there, but
you're just traveling.
But how do you really control that? And then, wouldn't it be easier just to sell everybody? Make a global deal. So that's going to be the tension and pressures on the existing, business that we have of this sort of territory by territory sales. That, it's going to be a problem.
But what's going to happen? That's a bonus for all. Is for the first time in my life in the movie business, 30, however many plus years, there's going to be original language subtitled content from all of the international makers, and the dominance of the need for English language content in our own players is going to, it's not going to dissolve, but it's going to slightly dilute. It's never, dominance for English language is going to be there, obviously, because it's the global conversation. Yeah. But all of a sudden, I think it saves a little bit of domestic language content in each territory, even the hybrids of them. In Quebec, you have Quebecois content.
Yeah.
And then in all of the French territories, all of the language territories, Dutch, German, Spanish, the Latin market in its entirety, Portuguese, Brazil and Portugal. It's like all of a sudden original content coming out of these places. Wild.
No, I think it is good. I think there's still the fear of no matter what language it's in, like if the U.S. companies and particularly Disney, if they really dominate with their IP, like that everybody wants to see, Marvel and now
what they make,
there's still that issue. And as it gets more, global, there's going to be that. But so it's going to evolve. There's still the power of a company the size of Disney, quote Disney/Fox, is
it's true. I mean, if you go to France and you talk to someone who's a young film goer and you ask them, well, do you want to see the movie that's made here locally or do you want to see the Marvel movie?
Right.
The answer's pretty simple.
Yeah. And
they want to be part of the conversation, and anything that's done, even if it's spectacular in their local market, it's still a big bang on the door when it comes to making the spectacular, the tentpole.
Right. And even if you look at the local ones, right, all the funding of the government to make the local movies in France or Spain or whatever, are those people deciding what those movies get made, or are those the movies that the audience really wants to see or not? That's because it's not, it's tricky. It's a different system, and there's going to be this clash of the system. But I still am very optimistic and think it's all good because I think there's going to be more chances for filmmakers to make more movies and shows.
And I think on the episodic side, it's a home run.
It's a home run, yeah,
right?
It is.
On the theatrical side, it's still battle.
Yeah.
You're still going to battle with people wanting to be part of the global conversation.
Yeah.
So the global conversation is that big, huge American movie that, regardless of whether or not a local movie is opening up or not, this population, they want to be part of that because this social media is global.
Well, yeah. And the question is, do they, even if they want it, are there opportunities for alternatives, right? Or are there going to be enough alternative theaters, access? How is that going to shake out? And so it's going to take a while. It's all new.
And talking about broadcast and social media and platforms, I have a few friends that were in the theatrical business, one of them who now works for a company called Whistle Sports, and they do aggregated content, which is a sort of, in a sense, now displacing, because it's specific to sports viewing, but they are creating something that doesn't have a distribution like major cost in a sense, because of the ability to be able to get things out, which is what the sort of renegade version of what YouTube is. How do you see now, in a world where there's an anchor of YouTube's role and how YouTube evolves, and what has your interaction been with YouTube?
Well, it's been more on the promotional side, or like some kind of viral marketing that is used, but I could see them creating longer form content too.
YouTube,
yeah,
producing,
So we'll see. Like, you've seen everything evolve. Like, they're allowing everybody else to do it, but they could start. And they have such a platform,
right?
Yeah,
right. Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting. Well, God, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you
This has
so
been great.
much. This is awesome. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
this is really
thanks a lot,
fantastic.
Charlie. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.